Hi, I'm Holly Jarowski, and I am a friend of the Historical Society, and I'm here today with Dave Pike, one of the founders of the Sports Hall of Fame here in Grundy Center. Dave, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is David Pike. I'm a 1969 graduate of Grundy Center High School and played a variety of sports while I was going through school. So I've always had an interest in athletics, the athletes, the successes, and even tribulations of our sports teams. And so that's something I've always enjoyed.
So, Dave, can you tell us a little bit about the origins of the Hall of Fame and how it all got started?
In 2004, I was no longer living anywhere around here, but I came back and was talking to my dad, and it just happened that about that time, Jim Basie, one of Grundy Center's greatest athletes, had passed away of cancer. And I asked my dad, well, what's the talk around town about Jim Basie passing on? And he says, not that many people remember who he is. And that really struck a chord with me, because he was one of the guys that I idolized while I was growing up. And people, if they forget some of the legacy that we have in the sports, and Grundy Center being a great sports town, I just thought, boy, what can we do that we can help remember some of the great athletes we've had in the past? So the idea of the Sports Hall of Fame developed there, and I went to Rick Briggs, who was a good friend of mine, and he was living in Grundy Center and I was not, so it needed some local involvement. So I started talking to Rick, and he helped. He bought into the idea, thought that was a good idea. Let's explore it. We brought in different people like John Doak, Dick Lynch, Paul Eberline, and Terry Herron, and several others that helped us get this off the ground. And so it was really kind of a local group with a few of us that had moved away from town that helped with it. And we got it off the ground and got it started in 2004. And we've been at it for 20 years now.
Can you describe the process of starting the organization? What things did you look for, and what criteria did you have?
One of the things that we did was try to figure out what the criteria would be. And so the group of us that originally started talked through that and came up with the idea that for the first 2 or 3 years, we would only induct individuals, but eventually we wanted to induct teams, coaches, and contributors that have given a lot to the Grundy Center sports history. So we decided what those things were, and then the first 2 years we focused on individuals. And then I think in the third year we started bringing in coaches, and it was 10 years, I think, before we started doing teams. But we had to try to be consistent in our criteria, and so it was really a group effort. I might have started the idea for it, but it was Rick Briggs and John Doak and Paul Eberline and Terry Herron and Dick Lynch, these guys that were local, that were involved in it, that really made it go, because we needed money to make this work. Well, I lived out of state, and we had to rely on Rick really took the lead on the fundraising. And we would do an annual golf outing to raise money. And over the years, we've been able to sustain ourselves. So that's been a good thing for the Hall of Fame.
Sure. So honoring the vintage teams and making sure that they got remembered, do you want to elaborate on some of the very first inductees that you had?
Some of the reason for starting the Hall of Fame was because people are forgetting about who these old vintage teams and individuals were. So we had to do some research to find out things about them. For instance, I talked about Jim Basie, and he had earned 16 letters in high school. Well, when we started that, we didn't know how many letters he earned, but he was 4 sports, 4 letters. And so we did that with a lot of different people, going back to people like Bud Bergman, who was a great athlete, and then who went on and played in college for basketball at Iowa State. And trying to get that information was, an effort. And we even went farther back into the early 1900s, 1920, and found some really great athletes that went on where we couldn't find a lot of their high school information, but they played in college, and we were able to find information of what they did in order to justify their election into the Hall of Fame.
Can you tell us a little bit about the selection process, how they get chosen and who nominates?
Nominations are available from the public. We do have a committee of about 15 people, and they certainly can nominate, and we have over the years made nominations from the committee, but it's actually open to the public. So anybody that is interested in nominating somebody can certainly do so. But we do rely on them, if they're making that nomination, to do most of the research. Okay. I mean, we aren't structured to do in-depth research on somebody just throwing out a name and say, hey, you ought to consider them. Well, we need some help here.
Sure.
Give us some information. If they're still alive, go talk to them, get their history, and get what they did, what sports they were in, what their achievements were, what accolades they may have received, and gather those up. So we take nominations any time of the year. But when it comes to about December, we kind of cut it off for a while. And then in January, we share all the nomination requests with the committee, talk about them, and then vote. Okay. We vote. We do this on a conference call, FaceTime kind of thing. And then we do our voting, and the top however many we elect each year. And we kind of change that from year to year. It's not necessarily the same. Some years we're going to bring in some teams. Some years we say we're just going to do individuals. So we're kind of flexible each year on what we're doing. For instance, this year we're bringing in 4 teams and 4 individuals. So it's kind of a full plate for us in 2025.
And you have to have, you have to be out of school a certain number of years, all of that to qualify.
Yes, we have actually a written, I'm not sure what the right word for it is, a written bylaws that cover that. And you have to be done with your athletic career for at least 5 years.
Okay.
And I think the teams are like 10.
Okay.
They have to be past their year of achievement. So there are some guidelines like that. But they have to be a graduate of Grundy Center High School. They have to have gone to Grundy Center High School. But actually, the Hall of Fame is not just a high school Hall of Fame. It is a Grundy Center Sports Hall of Fame. And we have members in here that didn't do their athletics at Grundy Center, or like we have somebody that's in it for rodeo kinds of things, and that's Ryan Ross. And so there's a couple things like that where the person didn't do their sports in Grundy Center, but they were a Grundy Center high school graduate. So we have some flexibility there.
So how then do you look back to some of those vintage teams? Do you just try to sprinkle those throughout the years that you feel are important, or do you feel like you've kind of covered some of those really important, really older ones?
We made a specific effort over, I think, a 5-year period where any teams that we brought in had to be at least 50 years old. Okay. And we did research to find out, what their records were, who their coaches were, who their players were, and focus specifically on theirs. Because if we wanted to induct them, we were hoping they're still around, that the players and, not too many coaches were left, but that there were some players around that we could bring into the induction ceremony. So we did the best we could with that and finished that up a couple years ago. So now we're back to any team from any era can be nominated and elected to the Hall of Fame.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about any of those vintage teams? I know we had previously discussed like the 1953 football team or the 1935 girls basketball team.
Well, now the 35 girls basketball team is an interesting nomination and selection because we developed under Coach Joe Thielen a fairly decent girls basketball program. And they went and finished third in the state in 1935. And then the school dropped the program. And they didn't get it back until the early 1970s. So that was really kind of shocking. Mm-hmm. But that's the way the administration of the school at that time decided, those were tough times in the 1930s, and they decided they weren't going to fund basketball anymore. And apparently maybe some girl got hurt. There was a rumor that maybe it was from an injury, and they didn't want to subject the young females to the rigors of sports.
The rough game of basketball.
That's right. So whatever the reason was, they dropped it. So that was an interesting team, and we thought the committee felt that third place in the state warranted some recognition, and so they were successful in being elected to the Hall of Fame. Another one that interests me was during World War II, we had lost our football coach to the draft. And so they brought in a guy named Melvin Fritzl. And Melvin Fritzl was already in our Hall of Fame as an athlete. He was a terrific athlete at the University of Northern Iowa in the 1920s. Mm-hmm. He played football, basketball. He was the captain of the basketball team and running back on the football team. And he played shortstop on the baseball team. He was 4 letters each year in those 3 sports at UNI. Wow. We didn't know anything about his high school stuff, but we elected him as an athlete for his career at Northern Iowa. Well, he was living in Grundy Center during the war, and he was too old to be drafted. And, so they recruited him to be the football coach. And so Melvin takes over the team. And they didn't have enough guys that they could do a full scrimmage. So they would practice plays where they'd put a half a field of defenders on one side, and they'd run their plays to that one side, and then they'd practice them to the other side. That was pretty interesting. But Melvin, in the 2 years that he coached, in 1943, the team was undefeated. And just had a terrific team. They only gave up 13 points the whole season, and they averaged 30-some points a game. Bud Peterson was their running back, and he was fantastic. 1944, they went through the season undefeated, but they tied their first game 0-0, and they finished the season with nobody scoring on them. Wow. They didn't give up a point the entire season. So the 43-44 teams were nominated and elected, and I thought that was a pretty interesting bit of history.
Can you talk a little about how the classes are different for the state tournament back in the day, how there wasn't the hierarchy that there is today?
That would have been nice to have some of that because all these classes that they have today, I think makes it a little more fair. But we had to play teams. Our 1963 basketball team, I think it was, got to the sub-state. And who do they play in the sub-state? After beating Marshalltown, by the way, East Waterloo. And they lost the sub-state game. And I think that was one of the best basketball teams we ever had. And we elected them to the Hall of Fame just recently. So that was a good example of that. But there are other years where we would take teams to state, and I think if there would have been classes, we would have had more state champions in our past.
Yeah. So let's talk about the induction ceremony, and how do you prepare for that?
When we make the election of the candidates, one of my jobs is to call them up and let them know that they've been selected. And the first thing I do is, let them know about the induction ceremony, which we decided right from the beginning was going to be held during Felix Grundy days. And we chose the courthouse bandstand as the place to do that. And then I tell them, I'm going to call you back in a week and I want to do an interview to find out your sports background from your perspective so that we can write up a 3-minute, 4-minute sports biography that we're going to read at the induction ceremony. And I let them know they don't have to speak. All they have to do is stand there and take it. And so then I draft the first, I do a first draft of that, send it to them by email, and then they make any corrections that they need to do. And that's how we come up with the biographies that are going to be read at the induction ceremony. And then I ask them if they have somebody they'd like to be their presenter. So whether it's a parent, a coach, a co-player, or whatever, and we usually have somebody do the presenting of the awards that they get at the induction ceremony. So we get that all set up ahead of time, and then it really runs pretty smoothly. Terry Heron has been really good at helping me with the logistics at the induction ceremony so that we have all our plaques and our certificates and our hats that we give away to inductees. So you have to be a member of the Hall of Fame to get a hat. Okay. So we get all that lined up, and it really runs pretty smoothly. We have our biographies already in our MC. We have various MCs from year to year. And right now we have Sandy Van Diest Schmessing is our current MC. And so she'll take those biographies and edit them just a little bit to condense them, make sure we stay within our time frame. And so we just have to have those people show up for the induction ceremony, and it really runs pretty smooth. We have always worried about rain and getting rained out for our induction ceremony. And in 20 years, we never got rained out. But we switched this year to have the induction ceremony at the auditorium in the high school. And we're having it at 10:30 in the morning to try to piggyback on the fundraising breakfast, the Kiwanis breakfast that's ahead of us. And we're hoping that, one, we won't have to worry about weather anymore. And we're able to add some slides, background slides while we're doing the program, so it'll be a little more professional. I mean, not that it wasn't professional, but just to kind of add another level of sophistication, I guess. Sure. So we're looking forward to seeing how that works, and hopefully the public will follow from the breakfast into the induction ceremony.
And if you weren't local, where would you find a list of all of the inductees?
We have a Facebook page that you could find some of that information. We're working on doing a website. We need to make some progress on that. That we've been a little slow to bring to fruition. But in the past, we've done a couple books where we have 2 different volumes that take and cover all the teams, all those biographies that we read. We put in a book with some pictures to go with it, and they cover 2004 through 2023 before I ran into technical difficulties with the Kindle people or whoever is doing the books for us. They don't like my margins or something. I can't get them to accept updates, so we stopped doing that in 2023 due to technical difficulties. We're hoping to get all that information out on a website where it could be read easily. But those books are available through Amazon.
And they're also displayed at the school, am I correct? Some of them?
I'm pretty sure they've got a couple copies in the library at the school.
Okay.
And at the Grundy Center library should have those as well. Here's a copy of the first volume of the Grundy Center Sports Hall of Fame book, where we've accumulated all of the sports biographies and added pictures so that people can see who's in there and read specific sports biographies. And this is available on Amazon.com, so you can go out there and go into the book section and just look for Grundy Center Sports Hall of Fame, and it'll pull up the 2 volumes that are available. And this first one is 243 pages long, so the second one's not quite as long, but there's some great information in this book.
Do you have any personal connections to any of the inductees this year?
No,
Short
I
answer.
really don't. I really didn't know. Well, I do actually. Now that I think about it, yes, I have one connection to the 1970 2-mile relay team
Okay.
that is being inducted this year. They won state and set a record, state record for Class B at the time, and which is also a school record that still stands to this day. And the interesting tie to that, I graduated in 1969, and I was out for track the previous year, and I was on the 2-mile relay team the previous year with 3 out of the 4 guys that set the school record the next year. So they got rid of the dead weight in me, and brought in Brian Borkhardt to join Lee Lewers, Tim Williamson, and Mark Carter. And those guys all matured and got faster and better, and set the school record that still stands.
Wow. How do you think having the Hall of Fame improves our community?
I think it helps to remember a heritage. Grundy Center is a great sports town. They love their sports teams, and it doesn't matter if it's basketball, football, baseball, softball. It's just a great sports town, and we've had a lot of success over the years, and it really seems to be in a golden era right now, the way things are going in a number of programs. And, all the golf that we've had, the great tennis that we've had. It's not always, the big 3 sports. It's a lot of sports. And, Grundy Center is really noted for the golfing. But back when I was going to high school, we had a real great tradition in tennis. And a guy named Bob Stock in the early 1960s, where there were no classes, won state tennis. And he went on to a career in tennis, both in college, and he's played in Wimbledon twice. Wow. And he's played in the U.S. Open a couple times. Even though he didn't place, you have to be really top notch to even get into those competitions, and he did that. But then that started a string of tennis players that John Doak coached through the years, and Steve Ehlers, Bob Stock's in the Hall of Fame, Steve Ehlers is in the Hall of Fame, Ed Palmer is in the Hall of Fame, Norm Reek won a state championship, he's in the Hall of Fame, and Dave Ralston. Just all great tennis players that kind of came all in that 1960s to 1970s era. Great. So it's just neat that you can tell the stories or have a source that's relatively easy to get to find out about some of these different people, different sports, different coaches, different teams.
How do you feel when you see the inductees at this ceremony?
It's kind of special for me because I've interviewed them and written these bios, and in most cases, not all, but in some cases, I've never met them. And I'm not that familiar. I don't live here anymore, so I'm not as close to the, season-to-season activities of the different teams. So I get to meet them in person, and to me, that's what's really special. Sure. I'm getting to put a name and a face together with this sports biography, and it's neat that you can acknowledge their achievements and know that there's going to be some kind of legacy there that they will be remembered.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so you mentioned rodeo as being kind of a non-conforming or sport that people don't normally think of. Are there others that you have inducted that are kind of unusual?
We have, and I think one of them is rugby. We've got a couple guys that had outstanding sports career that rugby was a part of. So we've had a couple of those, and maybe the most unusual one that you wouldn't associate with Grundy Center is gymnastics. In a 1938 graduate named Hal Leffler, who was in our inaugural class, was an average athlete in high school, and he went to the University of Iowa and went out for the gymnastics team. And he had a knack for gymnastics. And by the time he graduated, he was the Iowa team captain for gymnastics. And so that was pretty interesting. And he not only did that, but he went on to be an executive in racquetball. and helped start racquetball in Europe, and was a really influential person in getting racquetball started in Europe. And so here's somebody from Grundy Center that did something interesting like that from 1938 graduate.
And did you mention he was also maybe in the war?
He was a pilot in World War II, and in one of the Historical Society publications, I think from our centennial, they had a picture of the plane that he flew, that he was the captain of, and it was the city of Grundy Center. And there was a logo of the city of Grundy Center on the side of the plane. And that's a great picture from that old centennial book.
So I understand that you have some non-athletes in the Hall of Fame. How does that work?
Yes, we do. One of the things we decided that we should include in the Hall of Fame were contributors. So they may not have been or done great things in their athletic careers, but they have supported it over the years. For instance, Harold Ingelkus was a funeral director in Grundy Center for a long, long time, and for 30 or 40 years, he was the announcer at football and basketball games. And I believe it was a volunteer job. I don't believe he got paid for it. And he gave his time to do all these football games and basketball games all those decades. And we thought, well, somebody that does things like that, deserves some recognition, and that it isn't all players and coaches. There are other factors that add to the Grundy Center sports legacy. Rick Briggs is another contributor that we nominated and elected a few years ago, and he did a number of things from refereeing to filling in as the golf coach and helping with the girls basketball program, and actually being the driving force of the Grundy Center Sports Hall of Fame. And so he's another one that we had, and I think we've got a couple others in there, but we will recognize people that have really contributed greatly to the success and the legacy of Grundy Center sports, even if they weren't a contributor themselves. And we also have administrators.
Okay.
So those that have helped build the sports programs over the years. And not necessarily in Grundy Center. We had a Grundy Center graduate, Vernon Morrison, and he went on in Minnesota to become a great coach, and then he became an administrator, athletic director, and was recognized in like 4 Hall of Fames in and around Minnesota for his efforts to promote sports. In his case, mostly in Minnesota, but he was a Grundy Center graduate that made a significant contribution elsewhere, and we have a couple of those.
Wonderful. So one more time, if you would like to nominate someone, that's open to the public. Anyone can nominate someone.
That's correct. And we don't have a specific, well, actually, we do have a specific format that you can get online. We do require that nominations be electronic because it's just so much easier to share the information with the committee. But there isn't a form that they have to follow. So somebody can just put together a letter and the achievements of someone in any kind of free form they want to do. But we do have a form available to kind of help them out that we can get to them electronically. So we really encourage the public to come forward and make nominations or contact one of our committee members that they can give it to. But it's a pretty easy process if they put their mind to putting something together.
Sure. How many people are in the Hall of Fame?
I think we're pushing 100. And then you add teams on top of it.
Sure.
I'm not sure what the exact number is, but at one point I remember that we were in the 80s, the high 80s, and going into the 90s. So we may be above 100 right now.
Well, Dave, we thank you so much for joining us today and, just starting this wonderful organization for the community. It helps enhance the activities of the Historical Society, preserving those memories and making sure those people are honored. And if you have a nomination, we really encourage you to submit to your committee so that they can also be honored and remembered.
My pleasure.